There is a silence that lives inside certain people, not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of a mind that has learned to speak a language no one else seems to understand. You sit in conversations, surrounded by voices, by laughter, by the hum of human connection, and yet you feel utterly alone. Not because you lack the ability to connect, but because the connections available to you feel like shallow water when you are drowning in an ocean of depth. Ibn Arabi, the great Sufi mystic, understood this loneliness intimately. He saw it not as a deficiency, but as a revelation, a psychological and spiritual state that emerges when the soul begins to see what others cannot. Intelligence, he observed, creates distance. Understanding creates separation. The more you perceive, the fewer people can perceive with you. And so you find yourself here, reading these words, wondering if perhaps there is something fundamentally wrong with you, when in truth, you are simply operating on a frequency that few can hear. This is not a story about being broken. This is a story about being awake in a world that prefers to sleep. And it begins with understanding the psychological architecture of solitude, why some souls are built for depth rather than breadth, for quality rather than quantity, for truth rather than comfort. The psychologists will tell you that having few or no friends can stem from various factors: personality traits, cognitive patterns, emotional wiring. But Ibn Arabi would tell you something deeper, that your loneliness might be the most sacred thing about you, that the gap you feel between yourself and others is not a void to be filled with desperate connection, but a threshold to be crossed into a more profound understanding of what connection actually means. You see, there are people who collect friendships like stamps, who measure their worth by the fullness of their social calendar, by the number of notifications on their phone. And then there are people like you, people who would rather spend an evening alone with their thoughts than waste energy on conversations that lead nowhere, that touch nothing real, that leave you more exhausted than when you began. Psychology confirms what Ibn Arabi intuited centuries ago, that this preference is not a pathology, but a personality architecture, a fundamental difference in how certain minds process connection, meaning, and fulfillment. The first psychological reason you may have few or no friends is that you possess what researchers call high independence. You do not need other people to feel complete. While the majority of humans are wired to seek constant social validation and support, you have developed an internal locus of worth. You know who you are without needing a mirror of external approval to confirm it. This is not arrogance. This is self-knowledge. And self-knowledge, Ibn Arabi taught, is the beginning of divine knowledge. When you understand yourself deeply, you stop requiring others to complete the sentences your soul is already speaking. But independence comes with a cost. The cost is that you become comfortable in your own company, so comfortable that most social interactions feel like interruptions rather than enhancements. You value your personal space, your solitude, your ability to think without the static of other people's opinions clouding your mind. Psychology reveals that highly independent individuals find building close friendships less important or natural. Not because they are incapable of love, but because they have found something that most people spend their entire lives searching for: contentment within themselves. The second reason is that you are a deep thinker, perhaps even an overthinker. Your mind does not operate on the surface level. When someone speaks to you about the weather, you are 3 layers beneath, thinking about climate patterns, human denial, existential impermanence. You cannot help it. Your brain is wired to see patterns, connections, implications, meanings beneath meanings. And this creates a profound isolation, because while everyone else is discussing what happened, you are analyzing why it happened, what it means, where it leads, what it reveals about the human condition. Ibn Arabi called this the burden of intelligence. Not the intelligence itself, but the isolation it creates. When you think deeply about everything, social interactions become exhausting. You are constantly translating your thoughts into simpler language, editing yourself, holding back 90% of what you actually want to say because you know it will either confuse people or make them uncomfortable. You have 10 thoughts, but only share one, and even that one feels watered down, diluted, a shadow of what you actually meant. Research from the British Journal of Psychology confirms what Ibn Arabi observed 8 centuries ago. The higher a person's IQ, the less they need constant and intense social interaction. For highly intelligent individuals, happiness does not depend on being the life of the party or having a wide circle of friends. In fact, frequent social interaction can disrupt their inner harmony and focus, ultimately lowering their sense of well-being. The renowned doctor working on a cancer vaccine, the writer crafting a literary masterpiece. These individuals do not need constant social stimulation. Interaction would only distract them from their primary mission, from the depth of work and thought that gives their life meaning. So if you find yourself preferring solitude to socializing, it may not be because you are antisocial or defective. It may be because your mind requires space to do the deep work it was designed to do. And shallow friendships, surface-level conversations, meaningless small talk, these things do not provide that space. They consume it. The third psychological reason you may have few friends is selective trust. You do not open up easily. You have learned, through experience or instinct, that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. This is not cynicism, this is discernment. You recognize that trust is not something to be given freely, but something to be earned through consistency, depth, and mutual respect. Psychology shows that selective trust helps protect people from being hurt, but it also limits their social circle to only those they truly value and feel safe with. You would rather have 2 friends who truly understand you than 20 who only know your surface. And this preference for depth over breadth means that you move slowly in relationships, that you test the waters before diving in, that you observe people carefully before deciding whether they are worthy of your time and emotional energy. Ibn Arabi taught that the soul recognizes its own kind. When someone who can match your depth appears, you will recognize them, and they will recognize you. But until then, you wait. You remain authentically yourself, even if that means remaining alone. Because authenticity for you is not negotiable. You will not pretend to be less intelligent, less perceptive, less deep, just to fit into social circles that would require you to shrink. The fourth reason is introversion, which psychology distinguishes from shyness. Introverts are not avoiding people out of fear. They are protecting their energy. They value quiet and reflection, and they understand that their mental and emotional resources are finite. Every social interaction withdraws from that account, and if they are not careful, they will find themselves depleted, running on empty, unable to function in the world. If you are an introvert, you know this feeling intimately. You know that after a day of socializing, even enjoyable socializing, you need hours or even days alone to recharge. You know that large groups drain you, that small talk feels like sandpaper on your soul, that you would rather have one meaningful conversation than 10 superficial ones. And because the modern world is structured around extroverted ideals, constant connectivity, networking, being on all the time, you often feel like there is something wrong with you for needing solitude. But Ibn Arabi would tell you that solitude is not the same as loneliness. Solitude is chosen, intentional, a space where you can be fully yourself without the burden of performance. Loneliness is wanting connection and not finding it, wanting to be understood and not being understood. Smart people, deep people, introverted people choose solitude because it is easier than shallow connection. But they feel loneliness because deep connection is so rare. Research confirms that introverts typically have smaller friendship circles than extroverts, not because they are incapable of connection, but because their neurological makeup finds available receptors satiated after just a few social interactions, causing them to withdraw from further interaction. This is not a flaw. This is how certain brains are designed, and understanding this can help you stop pathologizing your preference for a smaller, more intimate social world. The fifth reason is high sensitivity to social energy. Some people are highly attuned to the emotions and moods around them. They feel everything deeply, not just their own emotions, but the emotions of others. When they enter a room, they can sense tension, unspoken conflict, hidden sadness, buried rage. This heightened sensitivity makes them incredibly empathetic, but it also makes social situations overwhelming. If you are highly sensitive, you know that you cannot simply be in a room full of people without absorbing their energy. You feel their anxiety, their insecurity, their masked pain. And because you feel it so intensely, You need to protect yourself by limiting your exposure. This means saying no to invitations, avoiding large gatherings, choosing carefully who you spend time with. It means having fewer friends, but friends who understand your sensitivity and do not drain you. Psychology explains that sensitive people are not weak. They are wired differently. Their nervous systems process stimuli more deeply, which means they need more downtime, more quiet, more space. And in a culture that equates busyness with value and social activity with health, this need for space can feel like a deficiency. But it is not. It is simply a different way of being human. Ibn Arabi understood this when he wrote about khalwa, spiritual solitude. He taught that certain souls are called to retreat, not because they hate the world, but because they need silence to hear the voice of truth. In solitude, the noise of the world fades and the voice of truth becomes audible. For highly sensitive people, solitude is not an escape. It is a necessity. It is where they restore themselves, where they reconnect with their own essence, where they remember who they are beneath the layers of social performance. The sixth reason you may have few friends is emotional self-reliance. You process your emotions internally rather than externally. When something difficult happens, your first instinct is not to call a friend or seek support. It is to retreat into yourself and work through it alone. You spend a lot of time understanding how you feel before you tell anyone else. This emotional independence means you do not need friends in the way most people do. You do not need someone to validate your feelings or tell you that everything will be okay. You have learned to be your own emotional anchor, your own source of comfort and reassurance. And while this makes you incredibly resilient, it also means that you do not feel the urgent need for friendship that drives most social behavior. Psychology shows that people with strong self-worth do not need external validation to feel good about themselves. They build their confidence organically, and they do not depend on other people to define them. They know exactly who they are and what fulfills them. They are independent thinkers who are not easily swayed by others, which means they do not bend to peer pressure or change their mindset based on popular opinion. They feel totally comfortable having only a few friends because their friendships are meaningful and purposeful, not just fillers for empty time. Ibn Arabi taught that the journey to the real begins with self-knowledge, and self-knowledge requires solitude, reflection, the willingness to sit with yourself without distraction. Most people avoid this because when you strip away all the noise, all the busyness, all the social performance, you have to face yourself, and that can be terrifying. But for those who have the courage to do it, who have the strength to be alone with their own thoughts, a different kind of freedom emerges. The freedom of not needing anyone else to tell you who you are. The seventh reason is a lack of superficiality. You crave meaningful conversations. Small talk feels like work to you, not because you are rude or antisocial, but because surface-level exchanges do not satisfy something in you that needs more substance. You're not content with discussing the weather or weekend plans. You want to understand what is really going on beneath the surface. Psychology suggests that those who value quality over quantity in friendships tend to have greater emotional depth. They are not interested in collecting people. They want friends who really know them, and that takes time and intention. This means they have fewer friendships, but the friendships they do have are profound, intimate, built on mutual understanding and respect. The problem is that most people do not want to go that deep. They want easy, comfortable, uncomplicated relationships. They do not want to question, to analyze, to look beneath the surface. And so you find yourself in conversations where you are bored, exhausted, drained, not because the people are bad, but because the connection is shallow. And shallow connection for a deep person is worse than no connection at all. Ibn Arabi said that once you see, you cannot unsee, and that awareness separates you from people who do not see and do not want to see. You see the contradictions, the inconsistencies, the patterns, the lies we tell ourselves. You see the ways people hide from themselves, the ways they perform rather than reveal, the ways they talk without saying anything real. And once you see all of that, most conversations feel empty. The eighth reason is low self-esteem or social anxiety, which operates differently from the previous reasons. While high independence, deep thinking, and selective trust are strengths, low self-esteem is a wound. When you do not love yourself, You struggle to believe that others could love you. You feel like a burden, like you are not worthy of making friends or deserving of love. And so you isolate yourself not out of preference but out of fear. This kind of isolation is painful in a different way. It is not chosen solitude. It is enforced loneliness. You want connection, you crave it, but you do not know how to reach for it. You overthink every interaction. You stress yourself out when being around people, and ultimately, you eliminate that feeling by isolating yourself. But removing the feeling does not solve the problem. It only deepens it. Psychology shows that social anxiety can make it difficult to fully engage or connect with others, even when you have friends, leading to feelings of loneliness and isolation in social situations. You might be surrounded by people and still feel utterly alone because you are not truly present, not truly open, not truly yourself. You are performing, hiding, managing your anxiety rather than connecting. Ibn Arabi would say that this kind of loneliness is a call to turn inward, to face the parts of yourself you have been avoiding, to heal the wounds that keep you separated from both yourself and others. He taught that loneliness can be a path to the divine, a way of clearing space for something greater to enter. But that transformation requires willingness to sit with your pain, to examine your fears, to ask yourself why you believe you are unworthy of love. The ninth reason is mismatched expectations. You expect your friends to meet certain standards, companionship, support, understanding, and when they do not, you feel isolated and alone. You have an idea of what friendship should look like, and when reality does not match that idea, you withdraw. This creates a cycle where you are perpetually disappointed, perpetually searching for something that never quite materializes. Psychology shows that when friends do not meet our expectations, it can leave us feeling more alone than if we had no friends at all. Because the gap between what we hoped for and what we received is a constant reminder of what is missing. And so we pull back, we protect ourselves, we stop trying. But Ibn Arabi would ask, are your expectations realistic? Are you asking people to be something they were never meant to be? Are you looking for depth in shallow waters, for meaning in meaningless places, for connection in people who are not capable of the kind of connection you need? The solution is not to lower your standards, but to accept the rarity of deep connection and to stop forcing it where it does not exist. The 10th reason is unresolved conflict and insecurity within existing relationships. When there is tension, unspoken issues, or fear of rejection in your friendships, it creates distance. You start to withdraw, to hold back, to protect yourself from potential hurt. And even though you technically have friends, you feel lonely because the connections are strained, surface level, lacking the intimacy and trust that make friendship meaningful. This kind of loneliness is insidious because it masquerades as connection. You are not alone, but you feel alone. You have people in your life, but you cannot be yourself around them. And so you perform, you pretend, you keep the peace, all while feeling increasingly isolated inside. Ibn Arabi taught that true connection requires vulnerability, honesty, the willingness to be seen. But vulnerability is terrifying, especially when you have been hurt before. And so you protect yourself by staying surface level, by avoiding the difficult conversations, by pretending everything is fine. But in doing so, you sacrifice the very thing you are seeking, real, authentic, meaningful connection. So what do you do with all of this? How do you live in a world that values quantity when you are built for quality, that demands constant connection when you need solitude, that misunderstands your depth as dysfunction? First, you stop apologizing for who you are. You stop trying to force yourself into social molds that were never designed for you. You accept that you are different, that your needs are different, that your way of being in the world is different, and that is not a problem to be fixed. It is a truth to be honored. Second, you distinguish between solitude and loneliness. Solitude is sacred space, chosen retreat, the place where you restore yourself and connect with something deeper. Loneliness is the painful absence of connection, the longing for understanding that goes unmet. You can have solitude without loneliness, and you can have loneliness even in a crowd. Understanding the difference allows you to choose solitude intentionally rather than experiencing it as isolation. Third, You recognize that one deep connection is worth more than 1,000 shallow ones. You stop measuring your worth by the number of friends you have and start valuing the quality of the connections you do have. You understand that depth takes time, that real friendship is rare, that finding people who can match your wavelength is a gift, not a given. Fourth, you embrace the gifts of being alone: self-knowledge, inner authority, divine connection, creative power. Ibn Arabi taught that solitude is where the soul deepens, where transformation happens, where you learn to hear the voice of truth beneath the noise of the world. When you stop running from aloneness, you stop running from yourself. And in that stopping, in that stillness, something profound becomes possible. Fifth, you understand that intelligence, sensitivity, depth, these are not curses, even though they can feel like burdens. They are ways of seeing, ways of being, ways of engaging with the world that have value, even when they are not understood or appreciated. The fact that you think deeply, feel intensely, see clearly. This is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be honored. Sixth, you stop trying to make shallow people go deep, to make surface thinkers see patterns, to make people who do not question start questioning. It does not work. It only frustrates and exhausts you. Instead, you accept people where they are, and you save your depth for those who can meet you there. Seventh, if your lack of friends stems from low self-esteem, social anxiety, or unresolved wounds, you do the inner work required to heal. You seek help, you face your fears, you challenge the beliefs that tell you that you are unworthy of love. Because you are worthy, and healing is possible. Eighth, you balance solitude and connection. Ibn Arabi did not advocate for permanent isolation. He moved between solitude and community, between retreat and engagement. He taught that the soul needs both, solitude to deepen, connection to express. So you honor your need for alone time, but you also remain open to the possibility of meaningful connection when it appears. Ninth, you reframe loneliness as a sacred signal rather than a deficiency. Ibn Arabi taught that loneliness can be a path to the divine, a way of clearing space for something greater. When you stop filling every moment with distraction, with desperate attempts at connection, with noise, you create space for intimacy with yourself, with truth, with the sacred. Your loneliness becomes not a void to escape, but a threshold to cross. And finally, you trust the process. You trust that your solitude has meaning, that your depth has purpose, that your way of being in the world is not a mistake. You trust that the right people will find you when the time is right, and that until then your own company is enough. Because here is the ultimate truth that Ibn Arabi understood: you have never been alone. You have just been too loud to notice who has been sitting with you all along. The divine presence, the voice of truth, the essence of your own soul, these have been there the entire time, waiting for you to stop running, to stop performing, to stop pretending. Waiting for you to sit in the silence and listen. In that silence, loneliness transforms into something else entirely. Not the desperate need for external connection, but the profound recognition of internal fullness. Not the painful absence of others, but the peaceful presence of self. Not isolation, but intimacy. Intimacy with the deepest parts of who you are. Intimacy with truth. Intimacy with the sacred mystery that breathes through all things. This is what the mystics knew. This is what the deep thinkers, the sensitive souls, the solitary seekers have always known. That there is a kind of connection that does not require other people. A kind of love that does not depend on being loved back. A kind of peace that emerges not from having many friends, but from befriending yourself. So if you have few or no friends, perhaps it is not because you are broken, perhaps it is because you are built for a different kind of journey. A journey that requires solitude, silence, the courage to face yourself without distraction. A journey that leads not outward into the noise of the world, but inward into the quiet depths of your own soul. And in that inward journey, you may discover what Ibn Arabi discovered 800 years ago in his own solitude, that the loneliness you have been running from is actually the doorway to the most intimate connection you will ever know. Not connection with the crowd, but connection with the real. Not the voice of many, but the voice of one. Not the endless seeking outside yourself, but the profound finding within. This is the psychological truth that lives beneath your solitude. This is the reason you have few friends, and why that might be exactly what your soul needs. Not because connection does not matter, but because the connection you are seeking cannot be found in shallow waters. It can only be found in the depths, and the depths require descent. They require silence. They require the willingness to be alone until you are no longer lonely. Ibn Arabi spent years in retreat, alone with nothing but his prayers and his thoughts. And from that aloneness came some of the most profound spiritual insights humanity has ever known. He wrote that in solitude, the noise of the world fades and the voice of truth becomes audible. He discovered that loneliness is not emptiness, but fullness that has been cleared of noise. He learned that the soul who can sit in silence without running, without filling, without escaping, that soul discovers something most people never find: peace. Not the peace of having everything you want, but the peace of needing nothing more than what you already are. Not the peace of being understood by everyone, but the peace of understanding yourself. Not the peace of never being alone, but the peace of knowing that even in your aloneness, you are held by something far greater than any human friendship could provide. This is the gift hidden inside your loneliness. This is the sacred secret your solitude has been trying to tell you. That you were never meant to find yourself in the crowd. You were meant to find yourself in the quiet, in the space between words, in the silence between heartbeats, in the aloneness that is not empty but full of possibility, full of presence, full of the divine intimacy that only emerges when everything else falls away. So stop apologizing for your small circle. Stop pathologizing your preference for solitude. Stop trying to be someone you are not in order to fit into social structures that were never designed for souls like yours. Instead, honor the truth of who you are. Honor the depth you carry. Honor the intelligence that isolates you, and the sensitivity that protects you, and the independence that frees you. And know this: the loneliness you feel is not a life sentence. It is a sacred invitation. An invitation to turn inward, to go deeper, to discover the connection that exists beneath all connections, the connection between you and your own soul, between your soul and the truth, between the truth and the infinite mystery that holds it all. When you accept that invitation, when you stop running and start listening, something shifts. The loneliness does not disappear entirely, but it changes. It becomes less painful and more purposeful, less like a wound and more like a teacher, less like isolation and more like sacred solitude. And in that solitude, you will find what you have been seeking all along, not in the noise of many friendships, but in the silence of your own becoming, not in being understood by everyone, but in understanding yourself completely, not in never being alone, but in learning that aloneness is where the real work happens, where the soul deepens, where transformation becomes possible. This is the wisdom Ibn Arabi offers across 8 centuries. This is the psychological truth hidden in your loneliness. This is why you have few or no friends, and why that might be the most sacred thing about you. Because some souls are not meant for the crowd. They are meant for the depths, and the depths, by their very nature, are solitary. But in that solitude you will find everything you have been searching for in all the wrong places. You will find yourself. You will find truth. You will find the divine presence that has been waiting patiently for you to stop running and finally come home. And that homecoming, that return to yourself, that acceptance of your own sacred solitude, that is worth more than all the shallow friendships in the world. That is the gift your loneliness has been offering you all along, the gift of becoming who you truly are, in the silence, in the depths, in the beautiful, terrifying, sacred space of being utterly, completely, profoundly alone, until you are no longer alone at all.